Decades of living alone, and I still can't get used to the loneliness. I muttered with a sigh. It's been 30 years since my divorce, after my ex-wife cheated on me. Our marriage lasted only about 2 years. She was so beautiful that she was the talk of the neighborhood, and I, with my low income, short stature, and limited education, felt unworthy of her. That's probably why I couldn't do anything but step aside quietly when I found out she was cheating on me with her handsome ex-boyfriend. I just accepted it. After all, I thought he was more suitable for her. I could have demanded alimony, but that felt even more humiliating, so I didn't. I just wanted her out of my life, and honestly, I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. But that's all in the past now. However, I haven't even had a girlfriend in the many years since my divorce. Simply put, I'm just not attractive. Even marrying my ex-wife felt almost like a miracle. Now, at 60, I've been made to retire early from my company, and I live a modest life alone, working temp jobs without touching my retirement savings. On my days off, there are times when I don't speak to anyone all day, and if the break goes on too long, I worry if I'll be able to speak properly when I return to work. I spend my time watching TV alone, eating alone. What a boring life I lead. Sometimes I think that, but there's nothing I can do about it. Of course, there was a time when I thought about remarrying. But when I attended matchmaking parties, women didn't show interest in me, and the staff at marriage agencies seemed perplexed by me, a man with no notable qualities. It's not that my standards were high, but probably because my specs were visibly low. By my late 40s, I had given up on remarriage. Then, one day, as I was living this dull life, my middle school friend Mike invited me for a drink. Mike is the same age as me, and like me, he's divorced. But he's been in a relationship for 6 months and is living together, planning to get married soon. I'm envious. Mike is a bit timid but a gentle guy, and being someone with few friends, he's an important drinking buddy to me. As soon as we met, Mike said, "Don't you ever think about remarrying, John? Senior remarriages are becoming quite popular now." Hey, cut it out with the senior stuff. I'm still young at 60. Well, there was a time I wanted to remarry, but I've given up on that now. Then Mike flashed a sly smile and said, "So, you're not completely against remarrying, huh?" And he pulled out a photo from his bag. "Hey John, what do you think about meeting this lady for a matchmaking date?" What? I was so surprised by the word matchmaking that I almost spat out my beer. The woman in the photo was introduced by Mike's aunt, who enjoys setting up marriages as a hobby. When Mike told her he had a girlfriend, she asked if he knew any good men to introduce. The woman was 3 years younger than us. From the photo, she looked a bit grumpy, as if she didn't really want to remarry. "But, are you sure I'm okay? And from this photo, she doesn't seem eager to marry," I replied. Mike confidently said, "You'll be fine, John. Just meet her once. I think you two could get along well." I wasn't particularly against her, so I decided to go through with the matchmaking. On the day, I wore a suit I had prepared for the occasion and went to a fancy restaurant. There I saw Mike's aunt and the woman from the photo, looking slightly displeased. She saw me with a serious face and said in a soft voice, "My name is Grace. It's nice to meet you." Nervously, I introduced myself too. Throughout the matchmaking, Grace and I barely spoke, and Mike's aunt kept a conversation going. Whenever I tried to talk, Grace just nodded, looking away with a hint of disgust whenever our eyes met. She seemed eager to leave. Seeing her like that, I honestly started to feel disinterested too. I guess as adults, we're supposed to put on a good front, at least outwardly. I thought she was beautiful, but probably not nice in personality. After a while, I stopped trying to start a conversation. Seeing us not talking at all, Mike's aunt suggested, Why don't you two take a walk outside for a change of scenery? It's warm today, and the view here is beautiful," and practically forced us out of the room to the courtyard. Then Grace suddenly spoke up. "You probably just want to leave early, don't you?" To which I replied, annoyed. "Isn't it you who want to leave? I'm not here reluctantly, forced into this matchmaking date." This was the truth. I did harbor a slight hope for this matchmaking date. But Grace said, "Maybe you were hoping for someone younger, weren't you?" I came today because I couldn't say no to her, but honestly, I'm enjoying my work right now and don't feel like getting married. Sorry. Surprised by this unexpected turn of events, I thought to myself about what kind of life she must have had, but ended up laughing, thinking that's just how life is. On the way back from the courtyard, I asked Grace to send a refusal on my behalf. But she said she didn't want to reject me outright, as it would be embarrassing for her, and suggested meeting up 3 more times before deciding, to which I agreed. A few days later, out of respect for Mike, I decided not to lie and actually met up with Grace 3 times as we had agreed. I thought it was just a temporary relationship, so I might as well enjoy it. That's what I had in mind. Surprisingly, Grace and I had similar tastes in food, and we ended up going to a seafood restaurant we both loved. Grace showed up in casual clothes, but being beautiful, she looked good in anything. While I was staring at her, she suddenly asked, "Do you think my outfit is tacky?" Being with Grace was comfortable in the best way. She was beautiful, but I could talk to her without feeling tense. We had a lot in common, probably because we were close in age. On our second date, we went to a movie and then to a stylish bar with a great atmosphere. She was like a different person from when we first met, talking a lot more. Grace, like me, was divorced, and it turned out her ex-husband had cheated on her. He was a successful entrepreneur, good at his job, and also handsome. Apparently, he was quite popular with women. Maybe that's why she had become distrustful of men. Mike's aunt, who knew her, was worried and set up the matchmaking date. When I shared my own story of divorce with her, we found our lives had many similarities, and we ended up laughing together. It had been a long time since I'd spent so much enjoyable time with a woman. Preparing for our third date, I felt sad thinking it would be the end. Then I received a text on my cell phone. It was from Grace. Reading it, I was shocked. "I'm sorry, I can't make it today. I can't decide when the next time will be. I'm sorry." What? That's. I tried calling her, but her phone just rang. I texted her, but there was no reply. Had something happened? Or maybe she just became busy. Since we weren't officially dating, I couldn't keep contacting her too persistently. For the next few days, I spent my time in a gloomy mood. Then suddenly, I got a call from Mike's aunt. Hearing what she said, I was stunned. Grace's mother passed away. Grace's mother had died the day before she texted me. Her father had passed away when she was young, and her mother had been ill and in home care, but her condition worsened suddenly and she died. After that, Grace was so shocked and exhausted from caring for her mother, she quit her job and almost became a recluse. Grace and I couldn't meet in person, but we texted each other several times a month. It was just trivial things like what we ate that day, but I kept texting her, fearing if I stopped, she might disappear from my life. After about a year of this, Grace suddenly contacted me and asked to meet at a cafe. Grace looked a bit worn out, but her smile was just as bright as it had been a year ago. "I'm sorry for worrying you," she said. She told me that she dreamt of her mother, who said she shouldn't grieve forever and that she needed to move forward with her life. Watching Grace speak through teary eyes, I reflected on my own feelings from the day of the matchmaking date until now. I think Grace probably just sees me as a friend, but at some point, I had started seeing her as more than that. My feelings for Grace grew stronger day by day. I couldn't keep my feelings to myself any longer. Grace, do you remember our agreement to go on 3 dates after the matchmaking date? We've only had 2 so far. Would it be okay if I asked you out for our third? Grace looked at me with moist eyes and nodded gently. Then, the next Sunday, I invited her to a restaurant to express my feelings. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was one of Grace's favorites. As soon as we sat down, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I've fallen for you, Grace. Would you officially go out with me?" Grace, with wide eyes, responded, "I thought you only saw me as a friend." It seemed we had both felt the same way. We laughed together. Then she said, "I like you too, John. When I was down and staying at home, your regular messages really encouraged me. Thank you for being there during my tough times. If it's okay with you, I would like to date you." I immediately called Mike to share the news that Grace and I were now a couple. Mike laughed and said, "I always thought Grace and you would be perfect for each other." It turned out that Mike had a hunch we would get along well after hearing about her from his aunt and had encouraged her to go for the matchmaking date. "Thanks to you, Mike, I feel like I have hope in my life again," I said. "Of course, John, you've been my precious friend since middle school. I always wanted you to be happy," he replied. We had indeed been friends for a long time since our school days. "Remember when I was bullied in school because of my timid nature? You wrote me letters when I didn't want to go to school. They were about trivial things, but they meant a lot to me. I still remember your kindness. I want to be friends with you even when we're old men, and I want you to be happy," Mike said. I had almost forgotten those school days and murmured, "Did that really happen?" Finally, Mike ended the call by saying, "Be happy with Grace. I'm going to be happy with my girlfriend too. Let's meet up sometime and share our love stories over a drink." I felt incredibly grateful to Mike. I realized the importance of friendship, no matter the age. Grace and I continued our relationship smoothly, and about 6 months later, we started living together. Meanwhile, Mike married his girlfriend and seemed very happy when he told me about it. Hearing about Mike's marriage, I started thinking about marrying Grace, and about a year into our relationship, I proposed to her, and she was thrilled. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, but we became husband and wife. I never imagined someone like me could have such happy days. I plan to enjoy the rest of my life to the fullest with Grace. Henry. People say a name reflects a person, but I've lived a life fitting for my ordinary name, nothing extraordinary. Perhaps the one saving grace is having my dear wife, the most important person in my life. My wife, Emily, was diagnosed with dementia by our family doctor. I met my wife decades ago, a memory now far in the past. Our marriage was what you'd call an arranged marriage. The first time we met was at a matchmaking session set up by our parents. Young people today might find it unbelievable, but arranged marriages like ours were quite common in our era. "Where are we going today, Mr. Johnson?" I almost reminded my wife that she's a Johnson too, but I swallowed my words, watching her joyful expression. When the doctor first diagnosed her, I was shaken and terrified. Dementia can't be cured, only its progression can be slowed. I was scared that she would gradually become someone other than the Emily I knew. But even now, Emily is still here, her innocent laughter, reminiscent of our younger days, dazzlingly bright to me. "Let's go somewhere a bit further today." As I took her hand and stood up, my bones creaked. Though I no longer have the youthfulness of those days, my heart still races a bit when I hold her hand. We held hands and boarded an express train, heading towards our destination. The train is quiet and calm during weekday afternoons, with few passengers. As the train moved away from the city, the scenery changed, with more greenery appearing. While the scenery brought back nostalgia, the thought of what lied ahead excited me. "I'm feeling really excited," she said. Between the train's rhythmic movements, Emily said exactly what I was thinking. Looking at her, I saw a childlike smile. "Is this your first time seeing this scenery?" Asking with a faint hope, I watched her ponder before nodding in response. "I see." Even though I knew she wouldn't remember, the realization brought a poignant mix of sadness and loneliness. Our family doctor said that dementia symptoms vary from person to person, and some may lose their most precious memories. If that's true, this scenery might have been very special to Emily. It could have been a memory she didn't want to forget. Thinking this way somehow settled my heart. Yet, I still wished she could remember. As I was regretting my question, Emily softly murmured, "Even though it's supposed to be my first time seeing this, it makes me feel so warm inside. Probably because I'm with you, Mr. Johnson." Seeing the wrinkles around her eyes stretch with her smile made my regrets seem to disappear. When we got off the train, we could see a high mountain in the distance. Then, we took a bus deep into the forest, arriving at a hotel surrounded by trees. We finally made it. Standing in front of the hotel, named Green Mountain, my hands trembled, maybe from nervousness. It seemed Emily felt the same way. "Why do I feel so fluttery? Have we been here before? It's strange, I don't remember, but it feels familiar," she wondered, tilting her head. I simply smiled back, saying nothing. I wanted to tell her that we had been here before and what this place means to us. But I didn't want to force her to remember. Even if she can recall, if today becomes a good memory, that would make me happy. "Shall we go inside?" Taking Emily's hand, we started walking. "May I have the name on the reservation?" "It's Henry Johnson." As we opened the hotel's door, an elderly man in a deep blue suit stood there. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled seemed to embody his kindness. Noticing a pin badge on his chest, I read the name James Blue and the title manager. "This gentleman is the manager." He seems as calm as the hotel's atmosphere itself. While I was lost in thought, the manager, Mr. Blue, let out a quiet sound, as if noticing something. Looking beside me, Emily seemed to not have heard him and maintained an indifferent expression. I wondered what that was about. For a moment, I was curious, but Mr. Blue soon returned to his smile, so I decided not to worry about it. "Everything is in order. Let me show you to your room," he said. We followed Mr. Blue. We were led to a room called Aurora, the most expensive room in the hotel. "This room is lovely, Mr. Johnson." As we entered, there was a large window overlooking a courtyard. Emily rushed to the window. Her eyes sparkled as she gazed at the view. The courtyard was filled with a variety of blooming flowers, and it was clear from just a glance that they were well maintained. The garden was renowned for its breathtaking beauty. The hotel was designed so the courtyard was visible from everywhere, but this Aurora room reportedly offered the most beautiful view of the garden. A spacious, open French-style room with a fantastic view. I was glad we chose this room. "The flowers are so beautiful," Emily commented. Emily has always loved flowers. I remember learning about this passion of hers during our matchmaking meeting. The garden at the place where our matchmaking was held was also quite beautiful. Back then, I knew only basic flower names like sunflowers and lilies, but she taught me about various others. I was so happy about that, so after several dates, when I decided to propose, I arranged for a bouquet of 100 roses at the restaurant in this hotel that had the stunning view we were seeing now. There was a scene like this in a movie I saw around that time, and thinking it was a great idea, I decided to emulate it. "Will you marry me?" As I presented the bouquet of 100 roses, Emily looked at me with wide eyes. Was that too cheesy? As I regained my composure, I suddenly felt embarrassed, my face probably as red as the roses at that moment. In an arranged marriage like ours, Such a proposal wasn't typical. Emily, looking surprised and motionless, made me worry she thought I was odd, but then she softly laughed. "Thank you, Henry. I've never received such a wonderful gift. Of course, I'll marry you." From that day, we officially became husband and wife. Thinking back to those times, I couldn't help but smile. Although our skin, the wrinkles on our hands, and our bent backs have changed a lot since then. But the feelings I had when I was with Emily remained the same. She was happily gazing out the window. "I'm glad we came here," I said, watching her from behind. As we relaxed in the room, dinner time arrived before we knew it. The meal, using plenty of local vegetables and fish, was truly delicious. "Since we're here, how about we have a drink together?" I awkwardly suggested after dinner, and Emily nodded. "The dinner was really tasty," she said. She was touching her slightly flushed cheek with a smile. We enjoyed a rare drink together, slowly conversing. "Don't drink too much, Mr. Johnson. You're not good with alcohol," she teased as we enjoyed the leisurely time. "I thought it was you who couldn't handle your alcohol. Neither of us usually drank, but we always ordered a little when we were dining out." Emily would always get tipsy after just one drink. Her face was quite red now. Probably she already felt the effects, but her response was unexpected. "I get red-faced quickly when I drink, but that doesn't mean I'm weak," she claims. "What, really?" I was completely unaware of this. Surprised, I asked again, and Emily, a bit embarrassed, averted her gaze. "I thought appearing weak with alcohol would make me look cuter. I was just pretending." Her words, like a petulant young girl, made me laugh out loud. "I can never win against you, Emily," I said. We called it a night around 8 p.m. With the alcohol having worn off, Emily decided to use the open-air bath provided in the room. "An open-air bath, Mr. Johnson. How wonderful." I smiled again, recalling her excitement as she reported to me before heading to the bath. "I'm glad she's enjoying it," I said, taking a sip of warm tea, and sighed contentedly. This hotel was a famous, long-established place. Getting a reservation wasn't easy. But I wanted to stay here today, at this particular hotel. It had to be this hotel. I'm glad it's the same beautiful garden as back then. Even if Emily didn't remember, being able to show her the garden again was a joy for me. I took another sip of tea and glanced at my bag occasionally while leisurely waiting for her to return. "The bath was wonderful," Emily said, returning relaxed from the bath. "Well then, I guess I'll go now." "Hey, Mr. Johnson, when you go to the bath, make sure to look up first," she said with a smile as I prepared my towel and underwear. "Why's that?" I wondered if there was some folk remedy about looking up before entering a bath for health benefits. Curious, I asked her back, but Emily just smiled and didn't answer. "Just make sure you look up first. It'll definitely make the bath more enjoyable," she insisted. Compelled by her words, I entered the open-air bath alone. "This is amazing." As instructed, I looked up and immediately understood what Emily meant. The open space, the faint sound of crickets, but most thrilling was the star-filled sky visible through the gaps in the trees. Emily must have been referring to this starry sky. Such a sight was impossible to see in our town. Submerged up to my shoulders in the bath, I let out a sigh. Indeed, every part of this place is beautiful. "Welcome back, Mr. Johnson." Returning to the room, I found Emily gazing out the window, sipping tea. "It was really beautiful." "I knew you'd like it," she said. Her face was lit up like a child who had succeeded in a prank. She's always loved beautiful things, unchanged since the past. Spending time like this reminded me of when we first met, and also how long we've been together, which felt wonderful. What should I make of this day? What would make Emily happy? I have been thinking about this for our wedding anniversary. Would you spend the rest of your life with me? I took out a small black box from my bag. Inside was something I couldn't afford to give Emily on the day we vowed to marry. I've lived an ordinary life, much like my name suggests. A regular office worker at a general company. My salary was average, and as a young man, it was all I could do to make ends meet. That's why, even at such an important moment as my proposal, I couldn't afford to buy Emily a ring, and the roses were the best I could do. But still, she chose me. I don't need such things to be with you, she said with gentle words, staying with me all these years. Yet, it always remained a regret for me. Perhaps she did want a ring in her heart. Every girl dreams of wearing that glittering symbol. So, for our 30th wedding anniversary, I chose to present her with a ring. I'm sorry for not being able to give this to you sooner. As I opened the box and showed her the ring, Emily looked puzzled. Mr. Johnson, are you giving this to me? Yes, I'm truly sorry for the delay. Is that so? She seemed to not fully understand what I was saying. Emily gazed at the ring, tilting her head slightly. It's beautiful. I took the ring out of the black box and slid it onto a ring finger. Then, Emily raised her hand, admiring the ring with a mesmerized look. Emily. What is it? She turned her happy face towards me as I called her name. I took out something else from my bag and presented it to her. It was a single rose. I might not be able to prepare a grand gesture like 100 roses anymore, but this one carried all my feelings. I thought the rose might seem underwhelming after the ring. Feeling a bit sheepish, I watched as Emily's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, Henry. I've never received such a happy present, she said. I was startled when she called me by my first name. Since her illness, she had always referred to me by my last name. Emily looked at me steadily and gently grasped my hand. You even prepared a ring for me, such an expensive item. It must have been hard, right? But you know, I'm happy just being by your side, just being with you, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. Seeing her like that made me tear up too. I really can't match up to you, Emily. As I smiled softly, we both realized our tears were falling at the same time, and we ended up chuckling together. 30 years ago, I reserved a restaurant in this hotel, known for its garden views, despite having little money. I wanted to stay in this Aurora room but could only afford the restaurant. Though I couldn't afford a ring, I prepared 100 roses instead. I want to surprise her after dinner, I said. Understood. What a lovely surprise. The staff had agreed to my whims, and the day before, I had secretly left the 100 roses at the hotel. Looking back, they were very kind to a mere diner like me. It was an arranged marriage, and at that time, we had only met a month ago. But I was desperate to see Emily's happy face. She probably doesn't remember any of it now. Yet, she reacted to the proposal with the same words and expression as back then. I love you, Henry. I was so glad we could be here today, together in this place. The next morning, we strolled slowly down the hotel's corridor, wrapped in birdsong and sunrise. Mr. Johnson, it was so much fun. This will be a wonderful memory. She was smiling like a child as we walked side by side. Mr. Blue, the manager, greeted us warmly at the reception. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. After exchanging greetings and processing our checkout, Mr. Blue suddenly paused. Oh, I heard Mr. Blue make a sound as if he had just realized something. Wondering what it was, I noticed him deepening his smile. Such a beautiful ring, and a lovely flower, he said. Those words were directed at Emily, who was standing beside me. Following Mr. Blue's gaze, I saw she was holding a single rose, treasured in her hand. You're the couple from the rose bouquet incident, aren't you? No way. I was surprised to hear a familiar term, and Mr. Blue quietly nodded in confirmation. 30 years ago, you both visited our restaurant, right? I was the one who took care of the 100 roses for you. Back then, I was too desperate to pay attention to my surroundings. But it seems Mr. Blue remembered us. It was my very first task when I started working here, so I remember it well. I was so happy to see such a lovely couple formed in this hotel, he said with a joyful voice. Hearing him speak, I felt a deep sense of emotion, realizing that someone else held the memory of that day. Thank you for a wonderful time. I will definitely come here again with my wife. I gripped the warm hand beside me and thanked him. Jess, we eagerly await your return. With Mr. Blue's voice bidding us farewell, we started walking away. I decided to cherish both the new sparkle on her left hand and her smiling face as we held hands, regardless of what the future may hold.